Hi everyone, you're watching the Virtual Amicus and I'm Jay Luda. So today's topic for discussion would be on estate planning and private trusts. Now, what do we mean by estate planning and how important is estate planning? So people throughout their lives work really very hard to create assets for themselves, for their loved ones. But I so wish that they planned it the way they worked hard and they put in a lot of effort to create those assets so that it can be smoothly passed on to the next generation. Now, if you may recollect in my first episode that I had recorded, I had spoken about the importance of wills and how important it is for a person to consult his legal practitioner to be able to draft a proper will which is recognized in the eyes of law. So, what happens to these assets on an unexpected demise or if there's a bereavement in your family? So, we all have to be prepared for these contingencies. We need to prepare well in advance so that this devolution could be managed and executed properly. Now, should it be done by virtue or through the route of wills, or should it be done through trusts? It is very important to understand between the two. And an estate of a person could include certain financial assets, like it could be bank accounts, stocks, shares, trades. It could also be immovable property, for example, real estate, residential property. It could also be an intellectual property like that of a royalty. Now, how does one get rid of these hassles? And what are these different kind of trusts, and is it done for the purpose of tax saving, or does it help in planning? So to understand this concept further, we decided today to seek assistance from a very dynamic lawyer based in Bombay. We have with us amicus for today's session, Mr. Raman Mishra, who joins us from Mumbai. Now, just to give you all a brief introduction about our amicus for today's session, Mr. Raman Mishra is a Government Law College Mumbai alumni, and he also holds an LLM from Mumbai University. He started his career as an associate with Nasikwala Law Offices, where he spent the initial years of practice specializing in civil litigation and real estate transactions. He quickly rose through the ranks and was made a partner in 2018. Later, he moved out and established and started his own chamber. He started his own law firm by the name of Narayani Associates that has offices in Mumbai and Pune and deals in civil and commercial litigation, also specializes in deals in real estate, banking, and finance, and estate and succession planning. So thank you so much, Mr. Raman Mishra. So sorry we are bothering you on a busy working day. And so the stage is set, the floor is all yours. You may proceed. Thank you so much.
Hi, Jay. Thank you so much for the introduction and for setting the stage on this. We will immediately jump to the topic, estate planning and private trust. See, like you said and rightly said that people are quite used to making sort of doing their estate planning through wills, but there are latent problems. I mean, there are a lot of issues that we see in terms of doing your estate planning through wills. I'll just quickly highlight them because that is not the topic at hand today, but that will be a good sort of a, you will have a contrast when we're discussing the private trust in detail. One is that a will is a very simple document. There people believe that if they have written in their will that this is my last will and I will not make any further will after this, in that scenario, this will always hold good. That is not the case. You can at any point in time make another will and the previous will go into the dustbin. One of the that is one of the grounds that are always taken up in litigation when people are challenging a will. That is why will is very easy to challenge. Also, people can say it's a forged signature. Even if the signature is correct, the person was under coercion because he was old. Somebody can say, oh, he had dementia, he was lunatic. And these things become very difficult to prove for a simple reason that the person who wrote the will, no matter what is the value of the asset that the will was dealing with, is no more to defend the will. And that goes to the root of the matter that people find 1,000 reasons to challenge the will. And it is your word against mine, and of course, your proof against mine. If you have, let's say, one flat and some bank account, and you have one child, you should make a will. There is a very little possibility that somebody would challenge that. There is very little possibility that there would be any roadblocks for the person to receive your assets. But things get complicated when the estate is larger. Things get complicated when there are a lot of legatees. And things get complicated when you have a controversial bequest. So today, if you want to give away a large chunk to charity, your child may not like it. You want to give away a large chunk to one of the children for whatever is your reason, the other children may not like it. So the red flags are already there. Of course, the person writing the will would not be there to worry about the litigation, and this would sort of fall on the other person who are defending the will or who are challenging the will. But at certain places, it becomes even more complicated. Let's say you have a child who is differently abled. Let's say you have a child who is an alcoholic or does drugs, or you know that your child is going through some sort of a matrimonial dispute, and there are possibilities that he may have to face challenges. In those scenarios, writing a will and leaving it to your legatees becomes a little difficult and is not advisable, not just legally, but also on a very personal level. Like you said, I have spent number of years in litigation. I was into civil litigation, and I would see how at the drop of the hat you have litigations, and for what? So private trust, in a way, is a very good solution for your estate planning. To make things very simple, if you have an estate, you must plan for it. There are generally two tools that we look at for estate planning. One is a will, the other is a private trust. Will, I have just mentioned what could be the problems with a will, but now we will switch to private trust. So before I go down the private trust route and as to how these things work and whether it is for you or is not for you, let us go back and understand what a trust is. Now, we generally hear about trust when it is more in the form of a charitable trust. People who are doing good jobs, or it is a trust, it's an NGO, it is doing this, it is doing that. The trusts that we are going to talk about today are not same as charitable trust. The only similarity between a charitable trust and a private trust is that they both deal with trust. If you don't have trust in the person who is dealing with the assets of the trust, technically there is no trust. So private trust is as old in India as 1882. The statute that deals with private trust was introduced in the year 1882, and I'm sure that a large part of our population do not even know that this exists. The concept of a trust crystallized even much earlier in time, and if you would want to document it, it's a little controversial, but it came during the times of the Crusades, it came during the times of the Romans, one of the two. I don't know which is the real one because I wasn't around. But the idea has been the same, that when somebody would go out to, like there were lords who had to go and fight the Crusades. And by the time they would come back, there would be so much taxes imposed on them that their assets would be taken by the government. This was with the lords. Even the normal gentry also was facing the same problem. So the concept of trust came in, where I would entrust my assets in the name of somebody else who is not going into the war, so that 10 years later, or during the period of this 10 years, this person takes care of my assets while I am out there, pays the taxes if required, does everything necessary so that when I come back, my asset is protected. The trust that I reposed on this person was the concept that has eventually crystallized into our Act of 1882. This act has been around for very long. It remains unchallenged. So when people worry about private trust, whether they would hold the test of time, I would say it has already held the test of time, and it is only a matter of utilizing it. I think this is the background of a private trust. But just one quick clarification, that there are charitable trust acts in Gujarat and in Maharashtra, but it is not out there in most states. And therefore, if you want to start a charitable trust per se, you will have to register your trust under the 1882 Act. Now, this is a little on the complicated end. We can discuss it on maybe on some other subject at some other point in time. For now, we will switch to private trust. When you are setting up a private trust, and why we will deal with it in 2 minutes. When you are setting up a private trust, it requires three elements. One is the person who's settling it. The person could be called a settler, could be called the author, or could be called the grantor. It generally depends who is making the trust. If it's in the US, they want to call him a grantor. In India, you call him an author or a settler also. It's one and the same thing. It's basically the person who settles the trust. The person or people for whom the trust, for whose benefit the trust is being settled, are known as the beneficiaries. And the person who manages the trust is known as the trustee. You cannot have a trust unless you have these three elements in it. If one of them is missing, it is not a trust. There are other elements also. You can break it into different parts, as to somebody being a manager, somebody being a protector, and you can improvise on the structure of your trust. But these three are the essentials. From legal perspective, the legal title of all the assets which are in the trust are in the hands of the trustee. But the beneficial title is always with the beneficiaries. A trustee cannot at any point in time allow the benefits of the trust assets to go to anybody other than the beneficiaries. If he is doing that, if he, she, or it is doing that, then that can definitely be challenged and the trustee would land into a lot of trouble. Having said that, people in general, even those who are aware of private trust, are quite unsure about having an independent or an outsider as a trustee of their assets, which is a genuine fear. But there are a lot of ways to tackle that. More on that later. So when you are decided that you want to have a trust, the first thing that you do is you structurize your trust deed. You want to understand who is going to be the settler. Under the Income Tax Act, there are certain complications. So you want to make sure that it is a correct person who is settling the trust. Otherwise, there can be tax issues. Once let's say it is you yourself who's settling the trust, we'll take a hypothetical example so that we have good clarity on the subject. Let's say you want to settle the trust. So you are going to become the settler of the trust. You decide that your cousin should be the trustee of the trust. Let's say he's much younger to you and you want to hand over the assets to him. And the beneficiaries of the trust could be your lineal descendants. It could be your children, it could be your grandchildren, and so on and so forth. So the trust deed will record as to who is the settler, who are the beneficiaries, who is the trustee. Not only that, the trust deed is capable of defining when, how much, if at all, the payments are to be made. The extent to which you can go in defining the distribution mechanism is absolutely up to you. You can make it very simple, you can make it very complicated, you can give a tranche-based distribution, or you can say that, no, I do not want to give anything to one person, but only 1% of the asset, only when that person attains the age of 40, nothing before that. But to the other one, I want to give 2% every month, or I want to give 20,000, 1 lakh, 20 lakhs per month or per year, whatever. The distribution mechanism is absolutely up to you. The trustee will have to follow that distribution mechanism. And from that concept comes various structures of the trust. Because you have so many options, we like to structurize the trust into 4 major parts. One is a revocable trust. One is of course an irrevocable trust. One is a discretionary trust, and the other is a determinate trust. If you would just focus on the names, the reasons are quite clear. A revocable trust is a trust that allows the power to the settler to revoke it at any point in time, which means that if I settle the trust, I had a trustee take care of all the assets. Let's say hypothetically we'll look at 100 crores of assets are there, and I realize that I do not want to run the trust anymore. I will simply revoke the trust. All the assets will eventually come back to in my personal name, and the trust ends there. In an irrevocable trust, the settler, once he settled the trust and he has funded it, or somebody else has funded it, as the case may be, cannot revoke the trust. Revocation is a different process then, little complicated, but you need the consent of the beneficiaries. The trustees need to be on the same footing as the beneficiaries, and then maybe you can revoke it. But the settler, as the case may be, cannot revoke the trust. How is it helpful? It serves a certain purpose. We'll come to the advantages of private trust, and we'll discuss it there. Determinate and discretionary. Discretionary trust is a trust which allows you to not define the percentage or a share or a certain quantum that must go to the beneficiaries, and you leave it to the trustees. You tell the trustee that, look, this is the corpus. These are my children or my grandchildren or my family. I want you to take care of them, not just today, but X number of years down the line. Whenever they require money, if it's hospitalization, give whatever it is required. If it is education, you cap it at say 5 CR, whatever. So you give extensive directions to the trustee, but the idea of distribution, the amount that should go to the trustee is to the beneficiaries, is eventually a decision of the trustee. Of course, if you want, you can give certain directions in your trust deed itself as to the cap, so that it should not happen that the trustee has given the entire corpus to only one beneficiary for his education or as a seed capital to start a company. You do not want that situation. So you can give certain directions, but at the end of it, the trustee is the one who defines how much money will be paid. Now, the fear comes here for most people that what happens if the trustee just sides with one of the beneficiaries and goes ahead. Then you have concepts of manager, protector of a trust, where the trustee has to take the consent before any distribution is made. If something like that is recorded in the trust along with many other provisions, then you have a good trust, and it becomes very difficult to have a rogue trustee with you. And personally, we are aware of trusts that are going for generations at end now, and there is no problem at all. So this is discretionary. Determinate obviously is, let's say you have 4 beneficiaries in the trust, you say that everybody will get 25% of the income of the trust, or 25% of the corpus of the trust when the trust is determined or terminated. Or you can say one person will get X and the others will get X plus 2, X plus 5, whatever. So again, as long as the percentage or the quantum is defined, it's a determinate trust. If the percentage quantum is not defined, left to the trustee, it's a discretionary trust. Now, each serves a different purpose. Let's look at the advantages of a private trust, and then we will relate it with these different trusts. Like I was saying, that let's say there is a child who's an alcoholic, and you are really concerned about what is going to happen to him after you're not around. What if you write a will saying that everything goes to my son, and the son sells everything and goes the wrong way? So what you do is you write in the will, you write in your trust deed that X amount of money will be paid to him every month, while the corpus would be retained for his children or till the time your son is no more. So in that way, there would definitely be a sufficient amount of money that goes to your son, but it is not sudden money that spoils him further. You can put different circumstances in this. Now, sometimes what happens if there is only one beneficiary in the trust, he may claim the entire asset under certain provisions of the Trust Act. So we suggest that you should have at least 1 or 2 other beneficiaries also in the trust, and make the trust discretionary. That way, and sorry to say this, but your alcoholic son cannot say that the entire trust asset belongs to me, because the trustee can then turn around and say, no, there are other people also that if I want, I can give the money to. Therefore, you should be happy with what you're getting. This is what your parents wanted. And this, maybe later on, if you find your path, we may look at giving you more money. But as of today, you cannot claim the entire trust asset as your own. So this is where a discretionary structure really comes in handy. If you don't have any problems in the family, if everything is hunky-dory and you just want to effectively have a very smooth transition of your wealth to your children, you can just make a determinate trust saying everything is 50-50, whatever forms part of the trust assets. Now, somebody may ask a question saying that if you are going for succession planning through private trust and you're giving everything 50-50 to both your children, why not write a will? The reason remains the same, that trust was set up while I was alive. It was being run while I was alive. I was well aware of the provisions of the trust. I have made distributions and I have benefited from the trust. Therefore, now when I die, none of my children can turn around and say that this trust is bogus. So there is a lot of credibility that comes to a private trust because it was there when the settlor was alive. and it becomes very difficult to challenge it in a court of law. Maybe you can challenge a provision, maybe you can challenge one distribution for some reason, some technicality, but the trust in itself cannot be challenged. So if you are looking at a large estate, it's very important that you have your private trust. When you look at revocable, irrevocable trust, there are different benefits. Revocable trust, the income is clubbed in your own hands. Irrevocable trust, the trustee pays the income tax separately as a separate entity. When you are looking at, and I don't say that it has to be under this circumstance, but if you're looking at a court case hanging on your head, and let me tell you that you, and this is like a disclaimer, that you cannot think of making a private trust to run away from your creditors when they're coming knocking at your door. The idea behind a private trust is to set a certain amount of money separately, like people do in other cases, for a rainy day preparation. It is a legal way, it is not controversial, and the concept is very simple, that if I part with my asset at a time when I do not have any exposure, at a time when I do not look at any court cases and there is nothing out there, and the money is being kept for the benefit of somebody else but not myself, then at a later point in time, that money cannot be considered to be mine, and that is very equitable. So sometimes people like to do their estate planning only for the purpose that I want a certain amount of asset to be kept out only to benefit my family, no matter what happens to me. And that is a good case. For such cases, people prefer to have an irrevocable trust because they want to show, and not just show, they actually believe that I do not want to do anything with the assets of the trust. That is where the irrevocable assets come into picture. And revocable, like I said, would come where you are only looking at smooth succession planning. So apart from this, there are various reasons for which people make trust. Trusts are very beneficial abroad. If you would know that there's a concept of estate duty, we had that in India also, and it was abolished in 1985 for various reasons. And at the time of it was abolished, the percentage of estate duty that we were looking at was also 85%. What it meant was that whether you write a will or you do not write a will, or you die intestate, as the case may be, whatever the value of your asset above a certain threshold, 85% of that would go to the government, and what remains is going to come back to the legatees and would be distributed in the manner that the will would contemplate. Estate duty is still there in the US and in the UK, and private trusts are one of the tools that people utilize, and quite legally, to sort of set away a certain amount of money which is not affected by estate duty. There are various factors that you have to take into consideration, but other than that, it overall is a very beneficial structure in the US and UK. India, we don't know about it so much, and majorly because it is something that becomes very, very useful for the HNI and the ultra HNI individuals and families. For simple families who are looking at, like I said, a very limited resource estate, and let's say 1 or 2 children, and there are no disputes in the family, there is no good reason for you to go ahead and establish your private trust. But if you do, I can promise you that the possibility of anybody challenging it, unlike in the case of a will, are next to nil. And I think that is a fair background and understanding of the trust. Jay, I would be happy to take questions from you if you have it.
Yes, of course, Mr. Mishra. Thank you so much for your valuable insights on a very important topic, on a very important subject that often gets neglected, and especially because we all are in the middle of a pandemic. So it is very important to understand the importance of estate planning and the route to opt for. So a couple of questions there which I have. Number one, so if suppose a person approaches you or a client approaches you, so would you suggest him, or would you tell him to consider making a trust instead of a will?
So that would actually depend upon what are the concerns of the person. Like I said, that if it's a if it's a very simple case And then I would suggest that you make a will, because one, it is softer on the pocket. Second is, if you don't require it, you don't have to make it. As simple as that. So whether you require it, let's say you have a, like I said, a differently abled child, and you are concerned that after you, who's going to take care of the child? You may have all the assets in the world, but you want to make sure that your child is taken well care of. You would want to entrust it upon somebody, and that is where the concept of corporate trustees also come in. And there are a lot of players out there who are doing an amazing job at it. So if that is the scenario, let's say second is, if somebody says that I want to basically allocate some amount of money for one of my children because they're not doing well in life, but I do not want to give away everything for obvious reasons. So if these are the concerns, and there are substantial assets, then definitely one should make a trust. What happens is that one prefers to appoint a friend or a family member as a trustee, not realizing that they are of the same age as yourself. So by the time you get old or something, there's a possibility that person may also not be around. So it is very important that to continue the trust for the benefit of the lineal descendants or whoever you're concerned about, either the trustee has to be much younger on an individual level, or it has to be somebody who is a corporate, because that allows you that sort of continuity. You don't have to put all your money into the trust. There's only a portion that you may think, and then once you get more comfort, you can think of expanding. So these are the criterias on which I would want to first decide whether this person should be making a trust, because there would be certain outgoings annually if you make a private trust. So I think estate is going to define whether a trust should be made, and the complications that the client is facing. They both together are going to allow me to decide whether a trust should be made or a simple will would suffice.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Mishra there. So my next question is, so people generally have this concern that if, for example, there's a trustee who is outside of the family, and how can this concern be addressed so that this trustee does not become rogue in future?
So if you go to any reputed corporate trustee, and there are few, their neck is on the line at all points in time. If there is one little mistake, and I'm talking about corporate trustee right now, I'll come to an independent trustee also, but generally I like to suggest corporate trustees. Their neck is on the line. If there is one wrong news about them, their entire clientele would go, because it will become very difficult. It's a matter of saving your face. So they dare not make a mistake. That is one buffer. Second is that again, this is their bread and butter, and this is what they do. I mean, tomorrow anybody can become rogue, and now coming in comparison to a corporate trustee, coming to an independent trustee also, there is the possibility of an independent trustee going rogue is equal as a corporate trustee. There is no way you can know if a person is going to go rogue or not, but you have certain, like I was explaining, you can have certain checks and balances. One, if you're making a trust deed, you can make some sort of a provision, which has to be very well worded, which effectively says that no distribution will happen unless there is consent from Mr. A or Mr. B. Second, if any sort of a distribution is happening, that distribution, even as a matter of principle, also always happens to a beneficiary or for the benefit of a beneficiary. If a private trustee makes any distribution to somebody who's not a beneficiary, whether or not there is a consent or something, that is recorded, and that trustee is in a lot of trouble. All I want to say is that tomorrow you will have to weigh your options. If you really require a private trust for reasons that I've explained, and you are unable to trust somebody, you can start with a family member. You may think of switching to an independent person once you have more comfort. But I think the pros of having a private of an independent trustee or a corporate trustee are much higher as compared to a family member, because people going rogue, people challenging what you are doing, is equal within the family as it is outside the family.
And finally, how much time in general does it take to build a trust? to set up a
So to
trust.
build a trust, it takes a lot of time, but
I stand corrected there.
but to draft and settle a trust, as you're asking, it depends. What happens is there are a lot of complications that people want to resolve by way of a private trust. It is not just your personal estate planning, it could be your professional planning also. You may have company shares, you may have a listed company, you may have a private limited company, LLP shares. There are a lot of things that you would want to put in order looking at the future. So there could be a trust within a trust. There could be some sort of a provision which allows a trust to change its nature after such certain period of time, because you have to address each and every concern of the client. For a simple trust, which is, it's a plain vanilla structure, it wouldn't take much time. But like I said, it absolutely depends upon how complex the structure is. There are a lot of inputs that are required from the client. But if you would want me to put it in terms of days, a plain vanilla structure could be ready as short as within a week. It is then, of course, there are a lot of administrative actions. You have to open bank accounts, you have to apply for TAN, PAN, which are things which are not under our control, which takes its own sweet time. But as far as drafting is concerned, it can be done pretty quickly. And in case of intense structures also, it can go up to as long as 3 to 6 months also, because there are a lot of inputs required in those scenarios.
Thank you so much, Mr. Raman Mishra, once again for an insightful session. I'm sure this discourse, this presentation will benefit all our viewers who are watching this on estate planning and private trusts, and how important this planning is and how often neglected this kind of a planning is. So thank you so much, Mr. Raman Mishra. And we hope to see you again super soon on another subject or another legal topic or issue whatsoever. Thank you so much, everybody. Stay tuned. Next episode is on its way. Please stay home. Please stay indoors. Take care of yourselves. Venture out only when it's essential. And it's goodbye for now. Thank you.
Thank you.